Right, so today I thought I'd take you around the Toyota Supra that I'm running long term for Car Magazine at the moment. So let's have a look around. As you probably know, it's based on a BMW platform and shared with the Z4. So everything that's underneath it is fundamentally BMW. So the platform, the electrical architecture, the engine and transmission, even the 19-inch tyres are all the same size as you get on the Z4. But there are some crucial differences, of course. Obviously Toyota's worked its own magic on the car, and the Z4 is a convertible only. This is a coupe only, so very different structure in that regard. I'd be really interested to know as well what you think of the looks of it in the comments section. If we go here, I think that looks quite odd in terms of the glass house. It's quite upright, and maybe that's a result of them putting a different, designing it and then having to adapt it to the BMW platform. But if we move here, I think that looks absolutely fabulous. I think it looks a really, really cool car. I love how Japanese it looks, how distinctive. You couldn't mistake it for a European car at all. The aggression in it as well. You can see echoes of the old Mk5 Supra in the rear as well, but with a much more kind of extravagant design to those rear lights, and the F1 style diffuser as well. I love the double bubble roof. I don't know if you can see that. That means there's plenty of headroom. I mean, even quite a Nissan GTR look to that glass house there with the blacked out A-pillar here, and the way it sort of flows into here is very GTR. And maybe from there you can see, look, you can see the double bubble roof where it bumps up in the middle for more headroom, especially if you're wearing a helmet. So yeah, I think it's interesting to look at. It's quite angle sensitive and fabulous from some angles, but not so much from others. Let's have a quick look under the bonnet. So I mentioned the BMW connection. So it's a 3-litre turbocharged 6 in this car. You can get the BMW 4-cylinder as well. But there you go, look. It's 3-litre turbocharged 6-cylinder, so 335 brake horsepower, 369 pound-foot of torque. It does 0 to 62 in just over 4 seconds, I think 4.2, and is flat out at 155 miles an hour. So interestingly, the US cars, I think presumably Japan as well, was updated to a 6-port version of this engine with, and as was the Z4, with 380 brake horsepower, 377 I think, lower compression pistons, and also some suspension changes as well, which is quite interesting. We don't get any of that because I think mainly because the engine isn't emissions compliant in Europe. So we stick with the launch engine, which, as I said, was 335 brake horsepower. So it's really smooth, it's quite characterful. Let's have a look inside. We get they're all with the 8-speed auto gearbox. And so here you can see that BMW DNA as well. You can see all this iDrive kind of stuff is familiar, which is no bad thing because BMW is so good at this. It's a class leading system. Even though this is the older version, it's still really good, really intuitive. We've got the sport button here, and there is, if I just take it off, let's get it onto here, look, and press sport. So you can see that's normal now. You have got some Toyota graphics there. And if I press sport, there we go, configure individual. And you can see I keep the damping in normal even when it's in sport, because I think it's too abrupt and spiky in sport for the road. But the rest of it I go with the sport setting. So sport steering is a bit firmer, so a bit more connected feeling. Engine for throttle response as well, and the transmission in sport. Now I always drive it in manual mode. So if it's in drive, I just knock it over there and then use these paddles here. I think if you had it in sport, if you do have it in sport in auto, it can be quite aggressive, and you're going through a 30 mile-an-hour zone and it's hanging onto ratios. So if I was leaving it in auto, I'd probably have it in normal, and in those circumstances. I drove it early on. We did a group test in June 2019, I think, for Car Magazine as well, and I really liked it. I think I had a more positive view on it than a lot of people who thought it was maybe quite soft. I still really like it now, but I've lived with it for 3 or 4 months, and I think maybe some of those early impressions have been tempered slightly. So the engine, as I said, I really like the engine. It's really smooth, really sophisticated. It pulls from really low. I think it starts to boost very low, maybe 1500 RPM, something like that. Like the 8-speed auto. It's not as punchy as a PDK, but it's still quick and flexible, and you've got that, you can be a full auto and really comfortable on the motorway, or quick enough for sporty driving as well. The brakes have got good feel to them, good stopping power, and the steering, I like the steering mostly. It's quick and pacey and quite nice and firm, and not a lot of slack in it, but yeah, there's no feel though, and I think they could really improve this car with more steering feel. When you kind of thread it down at a fast, a road with 3rd, 4th sweeping corners, I think it works really well. It's really enjoyable to drive, but this car, I think, feels a bit different, or quite different to the first car I drove in terms of traction. It seemed to slide much earlier than the first car I drove, so it slides quite quickly and quite abruptly sometimes, so you really have to be on your game sometimes to catch it. And yes, sometimes also it can feel quite settled and smooth when you're just driving along, but at other times the rear end can be quite abruptly checked, and really dance around just in a straight line. So I think there's a lot of stuff I like about this car. I really like the way it flows down the road, and the way it changes direction and feels quite nimble. But and a friend of mine, Garage D, Julian Smith, is doing power upgrades on them, and I know you can get crazy power, but I think the real gain, as he's also done as well, is with the chassis on this car, especially the back. And it's interesting that those US cars got some upgrades as well. I think probably more sophisticated dampers would help stop that abruptness, and I'm not sure exactly what's going on with the slides. It's quite a short wheelbase, actually shorter than the GT86, which is the smaller, cheaper car. That has 2+2 seats. This is just the 2-seater with straight through to the boot there, like an old 350Z. So it's a short wheelbase, quite a lot of torque that comes in early, so it's a good thump of torque to the rear wheels, and then that short wheelbase, and obviously cars with a shorter wheelbase slide faster than ones with a longer, more languid wheelbase. So yeah, I like the way this car drives, but I think the real gains to be had are in the suspension, and especially the rear end. And it's interesting to see that I think a company called Verkline has done a whole new rear subframe to optimize that. So it'll be interesting to see how owners respond to that, how the aftermarket kind of picks up on what's available, and how much that's embraced. Yeah, and for the rest of it, I'm as I said, I'm writing about this for Car Magazine. It's in the magazine at the moment. This is early January 2021. There'll be more updates online as well. And yeah, so give us a subscribe if you can. I really appreciate that, and we'll catch up next time.